Shabbat Shalom and welcome, everybody. I'm Rabbi Javier Karapan, and I am joined this morning by Leslie and our technical team. Thank you to our BOW committee for bringing us beyond our walls. And just so everybody knows at home, whatever you are, and here, that this morning, instead of our usual Dvar Torah, although there will be a little piece of introduction to the Haftarah as well, because I have to do that. I can't just do it. But I feel like I owe you some explanation about why we're reading the Haftarah that we're reading today. But the main focus will be Ask the Rabbi, which is me, and the topic is Shavuot, which begins at the end of Shabbat. So we're here now, and we'll come back again this evening at 6:30 for the Shavuot service.
It's going to be
Joy,
a good
joy,
one.
joy. It's going to be fun. It's confirmation, so it'll be lovely. And there's ice cream afterwards. So,
But if you don't come to services, you don't get ice cream.
and I'm going to be checking you.
We're going to count our
We're
numbers.
going to give you a little sticker that you can put on your.
Oh, a wristband.
A wristband.
You get a wristband when you come in, and then
That's an idea. We're not going to do that, but I'm thinking about it. We'll love to have you join us for that. As a reminder to everybody here, we are calling the page numbers in brackets, and take this moment to silence all our electronic devices. We continue our service on page 288, singing Mode Ani. מלך חי וקיים,
שהחזרת לי נשבעתי.
לחם לה, רב אמונתך, רב אמונתך, מודה אני לפניך, מלך חי וקיים, שהחזרת לי נשמעתי. לחם לה, רב האמונתך, We join together in the middle of page 291 in the English. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. With divine wisdom you have made our bodies, combining veins, arteries, and vital organs into a finely balanced network. Wondrous maker and sustainer of life, were one of them to fail, how well we are aware we would lack the strength to sustain life before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of our health and strength. Baruch Ata Adonai, Rofe Chol Basar Umafli La'asot. Page 292.
אלוהי נשמה
שנתת בי טהורי, אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי טהורי, אלוהי נשמה שנתת בי Page 293, Nizim B'chol Yom, blessings for daily miracles. And remember, try to do each one with one breath.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lesech vivina lehavchin ben yom uben laila.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivri.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam amechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam anoten layach koach.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hama'avir sheina me'enai utnuma me'af apai.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzelem Elohim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani bat chori.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Israel.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Israel betifara.
Amen.
We continue on page 301 with Pezuke de Zimra, verses of praise beginning with Baruch She'amar.
Baruch she'amar ve'haya haolam baruch hu.
Baruch Oseh Bereshit, Baruch Omer ve'oseh.
Baruch gozer u'mekayem, Baruch merachem al haaretz.
Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov lireav.
Baruch ha'elad ve'kayam lanetzach.
Baruch bodeh u'matzil, Baruch Shemo. Page 306, we join together in words from Psalm 150, Hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Kol haneshama te'aleluya, hallelujah, hallelujah. Kol haneshama te'aleluya. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Service continues on page 313. So we rise, if you're able, for Baruch Hu, the call to prayer. Lai, 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 lai. Lai, 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 lai. Yai, lai, 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 lai. Et Adonai, Baruch Adonai, We continue together with Or Chadash. It's on the same page, the last 3 lines in the Hebrew. Or Chadash al Tzion ta'ir, al Tzion ta'ir, Or Chadash al Tzion ta'ir. Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Page 319.
You may be seated. את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. אמת. Page 321 in the middle of the page. Sing the song of men and women, join in understanding and respect, the song of God's miracles on earth, protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come, the song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet and content, her soldiers home to leave no more, the song of the world redeemed, the song of peace. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות, אוסף פלא, שירה שפתיי, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש, נורא תהילות, אוסף פלא, אוסף פלא, אוסף פלא. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל. Please rise. Thank you. חירומך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל. אדוני שפתי תפתח, ופי יגיד תהילתך. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון גומר חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מחלחל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, זועק נופלים ורופך חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. We continue together on page 328. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קודשך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קודשך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. לשבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול, כי אל מלך גדול נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקיש.
ברוך אתה אדוני,
We continue silently through page 337.
שים שלום טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, עמך. שים שלום טובה וברכה,
Service continues with a service for the reading of the Torah. We begin together on page 367 with Al Shlosha Dvarim.
Or Romemu.
Or Romemu.
Yeah, I put the wrong thing on the list.
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
fine. Romemu, everybody. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'har Kodosho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu Le'har Kodosho. Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu a bad
That's
voice
nice.
from
That's
me. You know,
nice.
singing the lower register.
When my niece was younger, she called this the roaming cow song. Rome moo, right? Because the kids hear what they,
Okay, I don't understand it.
roaming moos, roaming cows. Rome moo sounded to her little ears like, why?
Cool. I
why is-
understand that. I understand
Can
that.
we sing the song about the roaming cows? I'm sorry, what?
Very good. I like it. Very good. So, for those of you joining us virtually, we have a link to the readings for this morning, which we will get to in a few minutes. Hold on a second, I need to do something here. And we will be reading from the Haftarah this morning, so we'll get there. But before that, it is time for our Ask the Rabbi. Now, that's me, and the topic this morning is Shavuot. That, as always, I try to frame this a little bit so it doesn't become... You got it too? Oh, thank you. We're a team. We know what's going on. Just some basics about Shavuot. It always is interesting to me that if you ask any group of Jewish children to sing you a Shavuot song, you'll get nothing. But that's your song. If anybody knows a Shavuot song, like you know a Hanukkah song or a Purim song, I'm glad to hear how you learn it, in which planet you lived that you learned a Shavuot song.
Me too, because this is now years of searching online for anything to come up for Shavuot.
We know what the solution always to that question is. For Leslie, it is...
Write a song.
That you're on. There you go. But until such a time comes and Leslie writes it and it's published and becomes a hit, no Shavuot songs. Also, just to remind you, we are, I think, in the Jewish culture in general, very much aware of things or symbols that we associate with many of the other holidays. So if I say apples and honey, well, there you go. If I say, Hamantaschen, Purim. Now, if I say dairy, what I probably will hear is either lacto intolerant, but you wouldn't hear necessarily Shavuot. All right, we'll get there. There's no good explanation for that if you ask that question. I'm just telling you now. But the festival of Shavuot appears in the Torah in the book of Deuteronomy, which is significant for a lot of reasons, but if you don't ask me the question, I won't answer that one. But it's called, it has three names. In the book of Deuteronomy, it's called Chag HaShavuot. In other words, the 7 weeks from Pesach to, what's that? I'm sorry. Are you okay? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So, but none of the answers are actually right. That's what I mean. The bottom line, nobody knows why we eat dairy on Shavuot. You can, but that's neither here nor there. So the festival is called Chag HaShavuot, actually just Shavuot in the book of Deuteronomy. In the book of Exodus, it's called Chag HaKatzir, which means the cutting, meaning the harvest. And in the book of Leviticus, it's called Chag HaBikurim, the festival of the first produce. All right. So what's the difference between Katzir and Bikurim? Well, Katzir has to do with grain harvesting, and Bikurim has to do with fruits from trees, like, no apples in the land of Israel, so we're talking about, dates and fruits that exist there. Oranges, maybe. Yeah, that's kind of a new thing. So pomegranates, perhaps, those kinds of things, yes. So, but here's the interesting piece, that the Torah never connects Shavuot with any events in the history of the Jewish people. And so comes later on, but it's not connected to anything to do with the Torah. As a matter of fact, and here's a curiosity for those of you who are curious about Jewish things, we have two holidays that somehow celebrate the Torah. One is called, of course, Simchat Torah, the name it's in there, and the other one is called Shavuot. The curiosity is that neither of those holidays appear in the Torah. It's like the Torah doesn't prescribe a holiday. It's very selfless, the Torah. Don't celebrate me, you celebrate other things. There's no holiday of the Torah. Actually, there's no, it's even bigger than that. There's no holiday of the Torah in the Hebrew Bible, period. It does not exist. So, but we do know that the third name of Shavuot, actually the fourth name, I will give you three, is Zman Matan Toratenu, which means the time or the season for the giving of our Torah. And so you got the four names, Chag HaKatzir, Chag HaBikurim, Shavuot, and Zman Matan Toratenu. So now I think those are the basics. So now I'm opening it up for questions related to Shavuot. And I think I have a question here already, and I will repeat the question if you will just be kind to speak loudly.
Well, this isn't a question, but it's a midrash that I learned just the other day. That when the Torah was given, so were the rules of Kashrut. And up until then, there were no rules of Kashrut. So when they came down, the meat wasn't kosher, the milk had spoiled, so they had to consume.
Okay, so a cute story about the milk and kashrut and all that. Okay, thank you, but I'm looking for questions, not answers. I see a hand over there. It's Dave. Okay, let's go with one.
Shavuot has always seemed a little frenetic to me because it's kind of associated with the book of Ruth. It's the giving of the Torah, but it really was just the Decalogue, right? It was just the Ten Commandments. There wasn't a Torah yet. So it's always seemed really disjointed. How did all of these things get to be associated with Shavuot? Because, like I said, it had nothing to do with Ruth, really, right?
So the question is, how did the festival of Shavuot kind of evolve into the things that we now associate with Shavuot? And Dave was adding that another dimension is that in the Jewish calendar we have several festivals or holidays when we read a Megillah, in other words, one of the scrolls, and there are 5 scrolls. The one that is associated with Shavuot is the book of Ruth. Well, there's no clear statement that the rabbis have to say this is why this happened. However, to answer how Shavuot and the Torah, the giving of the Torah, kind of came together, you have to know a little bit about the Jewish calendar. And this, again, did not happen in the Hebrew Bible. There are a couple of books that are outside of the canon of the Hebrew Bible. They're Jewish books, and they are the book of Jubilees and the book of Maccabees. And now the book of Maccabees has a list of Jewish holidays in which Simchat Torah is there, and Shavuot appears in connection to the giving of the Torah. But don't get too excited about it, because until the 2nd century, and we know this because there are 2 very famous Jewish historians and philosophers who lived, before the beginning of the 2nd century, who are Philo of Alexandria and Flavius Josephus. They don't know anything about Shavuot and the festival of the Torah. One more oddity, and this should blow everybody's mind. The Mishnah has a tractate called Bikurim, which means the first fruits. But Shavuot as a holiday that celebrates the Torah is not mentioned in the Mishnah. Now that's a big thing, to have a major Jewish holiday with a theme on the Torah not mentioned in the Mishnah. That is huge. Explanations, still a mystery. There is a text from the same period of the Mishnah called the Tosefta, which simply means the additional Mishnayot, that is written at that period, meaning what we call in Jewish history the Mishnaic period or the Tanaitic period. And in there is a mention of Shavuot as part of the Torah, like given the Torah. Now, in the Talmud, it becomes a little more clear that there is a connection between Shavuot and the giving of the Torah. But it's not until the 10th century when we actually get like a full-blown explanation. Now, going back to the calendar piece, and I have the text here so that you just know what it is. It says, it's from the book of Leviticus. It says, from the day on which you bring the sheaf of elevation offering, and the sheaf of elevation offering, it's a very long description for one little word called Omer. So when you bring the Omer, the day after the Sabbath, you shall count off 7 weeks, and when they're complete them, the 50 days, then you shall bring an offering of new grain, the bikurim, mincha chadasha, it says in Leviticus. Okay, no mention of the Torah, right? Because I tell you, it's not there. But how this text became the basis for connecting Shavuot and the giving of the Torah, I'm going to try to do it in my time allocated. So the problem is the interpretation of the little phrase, mimochorat Shabbat, meaning from the day after the Sabbath. Now, this description in the book of Leviticus is part of the description of Chag HaMatzot, which is the festival of matzah, which in the Torah is a separate holiday than Pesach. That's another story. We'll leave that for Ask the Rabbi for Pesach. So, and as part of the description of Chag HaMatzot, it says that you start counting the Omer. All right? The problem is that there are at least 2 major interpretations of what the word mimochorat Shabbat means. If I ask you, what do you think the day after Shabbat means? Most people will say, tomorrow, right? Today is Shabbat, the day after Shabbat. In which case, Shavuot would not be 50 days after Pesach, after the second day of Pesach, right? Because whenever the Shabbat after Chag HaMatzot happens, then you start giving the Omer. Now, you have some experience because we're in the middle of counting the Omer, but that is not the argument that won. But there was a great division in the Jewish people about how you count the next Shabbat. So how did the majority opinion counted it? They considered the first day of Pesach, a Yom Tov, a Shabbat, meaning not the proper noun Shabbat, but the noun that means rest. So Shabbat also means day of rest. Right? So there is Shabbat like a proper noun, the Sabbath, and there is Shabbat as day of rest. So they read, from the day on which you bring the sheaf to the elevation, the day after the day of rest. And so the first day of Pesach is a day of rest. So the second day outside of the land of Israel is not Shabbat, it's not a day of rest, so you count the Omer from there. Now, there were several groups imagine that, that we had different groups of people in Judaism that have different opinions, and for about 500 years or so, they stuck to that. So we know that for instance, some of the documents from the Dead Sea Scroll, they have a different calendar. And all these different groups had different calendars. One thing I forgot to mention is that not only Shavuot is not connected to the giving of the Torah and the Torah, Shavuot is the only major Jewish holiday that does not have a date prescribed in the Torah. Right, so the way that you calculate when Shavuot comes is this way, by counting the Omer. So the way the calendar works is that you have to first determine when the first new moon of Nisan is, and then you get from there Pesach, which is a whole other story there. And then once you get when Pesach is, then you count from the next day and you get Shavuot. And the thing about Mount Sinai is that the rabbis in the Talmud in particular made suggestions as to how you count exactly, where they are and how they came. Well, there are many ways of counting this, but there's one way in which counting 50 days from the first day of Pesach, you get to the 6th of Sivan, and they calculated that was the day when they arrived at Mount Sinai. They have a couple of days, and they calculate 2 or 3 days after that, Moses going up and giving the Torah. That's how you get there. But as you can tell, it took me about 10 minutes just to get to that point, and it actually took about 500 years to get to that point. So that is really what happened with Shavuot.
I know your time is up, but I have a
All
very,
right.
very important question.
Yes.
Why is it so important that this is in Deuteronomy?
Oh, because we know that the book of Deuteronomy, it's a much later book in the Torah, that the first 4 books were a unity already in the 8th century. And then the 5th book did not come into play until the time of Josiah, king of Judah. And this is called, in history, the reforms of Josiah. And the reform that Josiah introduced is that from then on, the only place that you could bring bikurim, the first fruits, was to the temple in Jerusalem. So his reform is to have the centrality of the cult in Jerusalem and not in any other place. So the sanctuaries in Shiloh, Bethel, and Dan were no longer kosher after Josiah's reign in the 8th century. So it is kind of a biased towards Jerusalem kind of text, but that is the text that we use. So then Shavuot and all the holidays really ended up being centered in Jerusalem, which was not the case before that. We had time for one more question, I think, because if there were any other questions, I'd be happy to. Dave, did you have another question? All right.
I mean, if you want it, I have.
Oh, please,
one.
yes.
Why do we study all night?
Oh, very good. So there is a custom called a tikkun leil Shavuot, and the word tikkun is the same word that we use for tikkun olam, meaning the repairing. That is a custom that appeared in the 16th century among Kabbalists, especially in Safed, which is in the north of Israel, where most of these Kabbalistic and mystical traditions come. So it comes from there. It comes from the main text of the Kabbalist kind of universe called the Zohar, which was written in Spain in the 13th, 14th century by one guy called Moisés Cordovero or Moshe Cordovero, which means that he was or lived or was born around the city of Córdoba, which is Córdoba in Spain today. So, and so there's a lot of literature about Kabbalistic traditions that became kind of mainstream. So someone I know in a previous life wrote a paper about this. I don't know where it is, but I can find it one of these days, about all the rituals that we do now as kind of normative Judaism that have Kabbalistic origin, like Kabbalat Shabbat is one of them.
That would be very cool. I would read that.
Yes, I don't know where it is. I can. Was some class I took. This is about in about 2 days, it'll be my 24th anniversary of my ordination. So I That was 5 years, so 5 years in school. So it's probably about 30 years ago when I wrote that, because I wrote it in Israel. So it's a long time ago. But there are all these, and there's a lot of literature about these particular things. But that is the story of Shabbat. And the piece that I think we can talk some other time is, how did confirmation get tagged into Shavuot?
Oh, that's not just an us thing. That's like,
That is not not a historic thing. No. The Reform movement has been doing that for about 200 years. But basically, the festival of Shavuot influenced Pentecost, which is part of the Christian tradition, and then in turn, Pentecost influenced Shavuot in the 19th century in Germany. So it's an interesting kind of.
guys, we have to wait a whole year to learn about that. Somebody remember. Set a
Somebody
reminder
remember
in
that.
1 year. We want to hear that explained.
Until then, we're going back to our Haftarah reading. The reading for the Torah for this Shabbat is the beginning of the book of Numbers, Bemidbar, and it's a text from the book of Hosea, or Hosea. How do you say it in English? Hosea. Yeah, thank you. He lived in the 8th century before the Common Era. He's the first prophet to really talk about the relationship between God and the people of Israel as a marriage. Now, I would say a troubled marriage, if you read specifically Hosea. So Hosea, in the name of God, talks about the northern Israelites, because he lived in those days, there were two kingdoms that were Jewish. The southern kingdom called Judah and the northern kingdom called Israel. And so Hosea, the image is that Israel, the body of the nation, is a mother, is the wife that has gone astray after false lovers, producing children conceived through that it's a very, we will call that today misogynistic. That's just what it is. So, but he does, he goes after the people in that way, but eventually there is time for purification. And the connection between the Torah and the Haftorah, sometimes, the Haftorah has a verse that quotes the Torah portion. Sometimes it's very clear. Here is more about the theme. So the book of Numbers in Hebrew is called Bemidbar. And the word Bemidbar is part of a phrase which should say Bemidbar Sinai, meaning the Hebrew word for desert or wilderness is Midbar. But if you say, in the desert, I will say Bamidbar. But this was Bemidbar because it's like half of a word, of a concept. It's Bemidbar Sinai, in the wilderness of Sinai. And in a couple of weeks, we will read the story of the golden calf, that the people kind of betrayed God, and there was a whole rehash of that. So the way that the prophet sees it, and sometimes this happens when the Haftarah is actually a midrash on the Torah portion. So, and it's a midrash in this way. Hosea sees the time in the wilderness as a time of purification. And so what's ahead of the kingdom of Israel in the 8th century and then in the 7th century is a period of being in the wilderness. Like God will abandon the people and let them kind of purify themselves, kind of make atonement, and then they could rejoin the people in a covenant with God. So the section we are reading is chapter 2, verses 16 through 22. So I chose to read the part in which things get better. But I just told you all the bad stuff. So when we read, we just read the positive part. And that's also a tradition on the Haftarah, and most texts are that way, which is that you don't want to end a reading or a Haftorah section or an Aliyah on a negative note. If the verse ends and says, and the people shall be obliterated from the earth, read another sentence. Don't leave there. So sometimes the rabbis go back on the Haftarah and put another one. So that happens a lot. Say in particular, in one of the Haftarahs, it says, Hashiveinu Adonai elecha v'nashuva, make us return, O God, and we will return, and I will blot out all your if not. So then the Haftorah rereads that next to last verse, so that we end with Hashiveinu Adonai Eloheinu v'nashuva, Chadesh yameinu kekedem, renew our days as in times of yore. So that's kind of the spirit. That's why I always try to, since we don't read the entire Torah portions and don't read the entire Haftorah, I try to find a little positive. But now you got the context of where it's coming from. So if you are able, we invite you to join us in the blessings before the Haftarah. Those are on page 372. And if you don't know them, do whatever part you like. And if you know it, just join me. It's a good way to learn them. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'neviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem הנאמרים באמת. Baruch atah Adonai הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו ובישראל עמו ובנביאי האמת והצדק. לכן הנה אנוכי מפתח בעול חיתיה מדבר ודיברתי על ליבה ונתתי לה את כרמיה משם את עמק עכו לפני תקווה. Assuredly, I will speak coaxingly to her and lead her through the wilderness, Bamidbar, and speak to her tenderly. I will give her vineyards from there and the valley of Acho as a plowland of hope. That's beautiful. I like that phrase. Where's the Hebrew here? Just so lefetach tikva. You know what that is?
Hope.
No.
Tikva,
What is
it's,
petach tikva? So the first Zionist town in the land of Israel is called Petach Tikva. Before Tel Aviv and all that, it's still a city. And it comes from Petach Tikva. Huh? Well, yes, or something more like a plowland of hope. But what I mean is that the name of the town comes from this week's Haftorah. That's what they got it. Petach Tikva. There she shall respond as in the days of her youth, when she came up from the land of Egypt. And in that day, declares Adonai, you will call me Ishi, meaning my man, and no more will you call me Baali, my Baal, my master, which it's a play of words because the major Canaanite deity is called Baal or Bel, and so they're playing with the Hebrew words here. For I will remove the names of the Baalim from her mouth, and they shall never more be mentioned by name. In that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, the birds of the sky, and the creeping things of the ground. I will also banish bow, sword, and war from the land. Thus I will let them lie down in safety. And I will spouse you forever. Verastich li leolam, verastich li betzedek uvemishpat uvechesed uberachamim, verastich li beemunah veyadat et Adonai. And you get a prize if you know what that is. This comes from when you put tefillin, all right, if you ever do, you put the tefillin on your hand. When you get to the top and you wrap the rest of the stuff on your fingers, you say, Verastich li leolam, verastich li betzedek v'bishpat v'chesed v'rachamim. That's why I know them by heart, because I used to wear them. So this is what you did. You say, these are the words from Hosea. I will espouse you forever. I will espouse you with righteousness and justice, and with goodness and mercy, and I will espouse you with faithfulness. Then you shall be devoted to Adonai. I know I always say this, but this is a very famous Haftarah reading. This particular book of Hosea, this chapter, is quoted all over the liturgy. And there were more
I was
things.
gonna say, it is.
There were,
Even I recognize some things
yes,
from that.
there's more things that we have in our prayer books. So, good chapter to memorize. If you're going to memorize one, memorize Hosea chapter 2. It'll get you a long way learning other things about prayer book and all that. Page 372, blessings after the reading of the Haftarah. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzaddik bechol hadorot האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק, על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה ולמנוחה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד, לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת. As we gather on this Shabbat morning, we think of those in need of healing. If you're on our Facebook, you can find the list in the comments. You can also find it in the e-news. We have the list here printed out for you. But at home, we invite you to type names. And for those of us here, we offer them out loud. As we think of those in need of healing, on page 371, we join our voices in the Mi Sheberach prayer. We think of those in need of healing. We offer a prayer for those suffering from addiction and mental health struggles. May the one who blessed our ancestors bring blessings of strength, compassion, and healing to those of us who struggle with the oppression of addiction, emotional distress, and mental suffering. Surround them with loving kindness, grace, companionship, and peace. Surveys for the reading of the Torah and Haftarah concludes on page 374 with Etz Chaim.
Etz Chaim hi lamachazikim bo v'tomcheh ha'meushar Erachea Darecheinu V'chol netivoteha shalom Ashivenu Adonai Elecha ve'nashuva Kadesh, Kadesh Yameinu Kadesh Yameinu Kekeden. Service continues with Aleinu L'Shabeach on page 586. If you're able, please stand and join us. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
As we prepare for our moment of remembrance, I invite you to turn to page 595. There are stars up above, so far away, we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest nights, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways that we remember. We remember the victims of the mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, Uvalde, Texas, and in so many other places in our country since then. We are observing the Shloshim period for Tony Ross, brother-in-law of Gail and Jeff Ross. And today, on this Shabbat, we mark the following yortzeit of members of our congregation: Z. Louise Willoughby Beck, Martin Bordeaux, Richard Campbell, Saul F. Cantor, Adrian Cohen, Jesse Raymond Dees, Joseph A. Frankel, Ben Hellman, Shirley Hellman, Marcia Handler, Chester Kaplan, Sarah Lee Optican, Edie Orland, Robert Rees, David Sains, Leo Tiven, Alan Murray Turner, Margaret Ward, Theodore Willoughby. Zichronam livracha, may the memories be for a blessing. Page 598, we rise together for Kaddish Yatom, the mourners Kaddish. Yitgadal ve'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, be'alema divra chirute ve'amlich malchute, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Israel, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach li'alam u'lalemei alemaya, yitbarach ve'ishtabach ve'itpa'ar ve'itromam ve'itnaseh, ve'itadar ve'itale ve'ithalal, shmei dekudesha borichu, לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דע אמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל,
It is now time for some announcements. I would like to invite Aviva Simons, as Director of Member Engagement for our congregation. Aviva?
This is Aviva's song. The announcements will come and they won't take too long. If you want to do some Jewish, she won't steer you wrong. This is Aviva's song.
Wow. Every time. Thank you.
Look, I almost didn't sing it last night, and there are actually people out here that said, wait, aren't we going to sing Aviva's song?
Right. I'll just have to walk slower in slow motion. All right, Shabbat Shalom, good morning. Thank you to everyone who made this service possible, and thank you to all of us who are here together this morning and online. What a great day to continue Shabbat. A few quick announcements. We will be back in this room at 6:30 p.m. So like was mentioned at the beginning of the service, all are welcome to join us. It is our Erev Shavuot service, which includes confirmation. And following the service, we are indeed having freezing moo rolled ice cream. And there is a non-dairy option, which I will be partaking in. And all are welcome to join me. So 6:30 p.m. tonight, right back here, and also live streamed on all of our virtual platforms. And then just two more quick announcements. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I will be partaking in a Beth Torah Park walk and Meshuggah Bagels taste test. So the park right behind us, Beth Torah Park, we will be walking around maybe for an hour, so not a huge long walk. And then we'll come back to Beth Torah and taste all of the Meshuggah bagel combinations that one's heart could desire. So it will be wonderful, 10 o'clock a.m. We are intending to eat bagels outside so that we can take off our masks and everyone can be comfortable. It might be inside, we'll just see what happens. And last but not least, 1 week from tonight is the barbecue bash. So it will be wonderful. We have more than 120 RSVPs at this point. We invite you to RSVP, not required though. There will be live music and excellent food and lots of games and connecting. So make sure to join us. And until then, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Aviva. Page 626, if you're able, please stand and join us in Ein Keloheinu. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadoneinu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadoneinu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu. Mi Eloheinu, mi Adonenu, mi Malkeinu, mi Moshienu. Ein Keloheinu, ein Adonenu, ein Malkeinu, ein Moshienu. Ein Keloheinu, ein Adonenu, ein Malkeinu, ein Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu. Ein Keloheinu, ein Adonenu, ein Malkeinu, ein Moshienu. Ein Keloheinu, ein Adonenu, ein Malkeinu, ein Moshienu. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach.
Take care of each other out there.